Well, hello and welcome once again to another Stir Crazy live panel. We have a fantastic group of experts today where we're going to be talking about regulations. Big thank you to Dana Lubner from Rent Responsibly, who is a big supporter and our head expert for Regulations Week. And this has been a good one. We were talking about Staywise Rentals, our fake but very friendly property management company who have been going through the worst month of their lives. And each week we've been trying to solve their biggest challenges. And in this panel today, we're going to be talking about regulations and how you can learn from some of the most incredible associations across North America and how they are helping to make things better for themselves and the businesses in their area. So before we kick off, let's just turn that music down a little bit. That was Justin Ford's music. He recommended that one. It's called Stir It Up. So before we kick off today, we have a few things that we like to add in to the show. The first thing is if you are not registered yet for Stir Crazy, it is never too late, because if you register right now at vacationrentalformula.com/SSTIR, that will give you access to a whole bunch of promotions and discounts, as well as workbooks and downloads. And we'll be able to follow up with you through the course of the year to make sure that you're helping to implement all of the elements of Stir Crazy, which is safety, sustainability, trust, insurance, and regulations. And one of the biggest benefits is our top sponsor, Guesty. We have to give them a big thank you for being our sponsor for Stir Crazy Month. You'll actually get 50% off your first year with Guesty only if you register now. So make sure you head across to vacationrentalformula.com/SSTIR and we'll get you on. And as part of your registration, you get access to our app. Now, in the app, if you go into the section on gamification, you can actually flash that QR code right now, and that'll give you 200 points towards winning 2 VIP tickets to the VR Nation conference in Austin, Texas, April 27th and 28th. And I think who on the panel is going to be in Austin this year? Sorry, Julie.
Okay, Julie, you miss out.
So you'll have the opportunity to meet Dana and Jonathan, myself, and Heather in Austin. And we have one more little thing to add in as well. We have Easter eggs that run all the way through the year. All the way through this program. So again, in that gamification section, you can head in, and the Easter egg is Easter egg number 9, and the keyword is legislation. Oh, get that out of my mouth. And you'll get an additional 200 points. That's 400 points right there. So even if you're not registered yet, you can get in and get those points for your chance. So last but not least, I just want to say, whatever platform that you are on, feel free to ask any questions, whether you're on LinkedIn Live, Facebook Live, YouTube Live. Go into the chat section and ask questions at any time, and we can bring those up on the screen, and our incredible panel will do their very best to answer those questions. And if you are watching the replay, leave them in the comments, and we'll come back in the following days and weeks and ensure to get back to you. That's all from me. I'm going to be in the background. I'm going to pass it over to Heather.
Thank you so much, Mike. Thank you for doing these introductions every week. It's I'm down in Alabama at the moment, and Mike's up in Ontario enjoying all that snow. So we don't actually get to chat very much. So this is really nice to see my business partner online like this. So here we are in week number 4 of Stir Crazy Month, and this week we're talking about regulations, and we're talking about what's been challenging our fictional property management company, Staywise Rentals, over the last month or so. Now, what's been happening to them in a month, hopefully many property managers aren't ever going to see this in their lifetime as a property manager. But I know from my experience as a property manager that you probably will have issues with trust, issues with safety, issues with insurance, regulations, and next week we have sustainability. This week, Staywise have having weathered the trust, safety, and insurance problems, now they've just received a 60-day compliance deadline from their city council. And the notice that they've received includes mandatory fire safety upgrades for all properties, new occupancy limits based on square footage. I remember this one well. We had this up in Ontario when when I was a property manager, occupancy limits hit us really, really hard. There's now a local representative required 24/7, which in fact is not a big issue for them. They did have this in place. Proof of adequate insurance coverage. And as we found last week in Insurance Week, they didn't have the insurance coverage that they needed for all their properties. Registration fees of $1,500 per property. These are new. More noise monitoring requirements and parking restrictions. And they've been hit by all of these. Staywise told me they do not have a local association, which I doubted, given that they are in a very popular beachside location. So that was my first task to them, was go and find your local associations. And that's when the idea for this panel came around, that we should find the top people in this industry who are involved with associations and have success stories that they can share to show why number one, you should belong to an association, or number two, if you have no association in your area, you need to start one. So let me welcome Dana Lubner, who is the, I have it as short-term rental community builder at Rent Responsibly. And Dana is also, we have found a founder of Mile High Host, which is Denver's short-term rental alliance. I've known Dana for a number of years. We were just talking about the fact we met in a coffee shop in New Orleans at a Verma conference, which just goes to show that you have to go to conferences because that's where you meet the coolest people. So welcome, Dana. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much. I'm so honored to be here with you and with these other panelists we have with us today.
Well, we also had to have Julie Marks with us. I mean, Mike and I both went to Mount Snow in December. It was cold last year. Yeah, it was my first visit to Vermont. We went to the Vermont Short-Term Rental Alliance Summit Conference get together. And that's where I got so blown away with the energy of all these people who were members of this alliance, who came together for such a great 2 days of conference. It really showed everybody the importance of these associations. I get excited about associations. I mean, maybe I'm an outlier, but I love to see people coming together like this with the same goals. So welcome, Julie. Good to see you again.
Thank you, Heather. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Well, great to have you, Julie. And when I went to Dana at the start of this and I said, who else should we have? And she said, no contest. You need to get hold of Jonathan Wicks from Well and Good. And I hadn't met Jonathan before. So this was a double advantage for me. I could get to meet Jonathan. We could have him on the panel. Jonathan's also involved in Arizonans for Responsible Tourism and has some great experience in this area. So welcome, Jonathan. Glad to have you as well.
Thank you, Heather. It's been awesome connecting with you and honored to share the panel with these advocate rock stars, no doubt.
This is it. You know, I went to Mike and I went to the into Banff last May to the Can Stays Rental Alliance conference, and it was 2 days really talking about regulations and talking about how people should get together and tackle these things, and that's when I really heard about this. You know, if you're not, if you don't have a seat at the table, then you're on the menu. And I know we're going to be touching on this, but this is the core of this discussion. We're going to be talking about success stories from these associations, in the hope that at the end of this, you will either, if you're not already a member of your local association, you are going to go and join it, or if you do not have an association, you're going to get in touch with Rent Responsibly and Dana and figure out how you get started in starting one. So does that sound good, folks?
Yes.
Woo-hoo.
Excellent. Well, let's go back to Staywise. Let's talk about how associations can make things better. we've all heard of stories of locations cracking down on short-term rentals. I'd like you to, help me out here with some stories where your association perhaps have actually helped to change the course of regulations for the better. So, how did that happen? What made it work? Kicking it out there, but let's start with Dana. She's been in this area a long time.
I think redefining what success means is really key when you think about having an outcome that is favorable to your goals and desires. I think when I first started in my journey into advocacy in 2019, we wanted to win every regulatory battle, and we defined winning as getting what we want. But the thing that I've learned over the course of the last 5+ years is that it has to be a compromise. And a recent legislative battle that happened in Colorado. So I sit as president of the Mile High Host Denver's Short-Term Rental Alliance, but also I sit on the board of the Colorado Lodging and Resort Alliance called CLARA. And we had a legislative battle last spring in 2024, where there was a threat to increase property taxes for short-term rentals by 400%. It was devastating, and it would really have wiped out much of our tourism. It would have hurt so many jobs. And so what we really were able to see is the power of creating a united front, the power of collecting data, the power of having conversations with our legislators. And it was just a testimony of how it's not a single-pronged approach. It has to be a multi-pronged approach. It has to be holistic in the sense that it is grassroots. It is your community, but then it also needs to be grass tops. So we paid for a lobbyist. We built a coalition with the booking platforms and the ski resorts. And we did a day at the Capitol where we had short-term rental hosts from all over Colorado show up, wear blue, showing a united front, and then requested meetings with policymakers and legislators. And if it wasn't for that united front, we would have not had the outcome that we had, which was defeating Senate Bill 33. And it doesn't mean that it won't come up again in future legislative sessions, or it won't take on a new shape or form, which we can maybe get into later. These creative pivots that we're seeing when we think about future regulations. But it's just the power of being a united front is the biggest takeaway that I think keeps me motivated to continue to do what I do, which is help advocates across the country and around the world.
That's great. Thank you. Jonathan, Arizona, I've heard about what's happened in Arizona over the years, and it's gone from sort of the state legislated regulations down to smaller areas, because I love going to Sedona, and I've remembered that seemed to flip-flop backwards and forwards. Tell me a bit about what happens there and how your association has got involved in this, what's been going on there.
Absolutely. So Arizona has been fortunate through the work of a lot of advocates, and preemption bill has been in place for the entire state, which in essence says that local municipalities cannot ban short-term rentals. This is something that is statewide. Within the last few years, there has been an additional bill that was passed that said that while they can't ban them, the local cities do have the ability to have a registration process, for instance, and have some a bit of a process in order for folks to list vacation rentals, which we were in support of. As a general sense, that is a good thing. However, as Dana mentioned, some of the strategic pivots, there were some cities that went outside of the boundaries of what that bill allowed for. And a great example is Carefree, Arizona. Carefree was one that they were looking to not really see an outcome that resulted in folks getting permits, but rather they were forming inspection processes in order to try to apply for a permit. And the inspectors were in essence told, don't approve it, find something that's wrong with the house, going in with a fine-tooth comb, far beyond anything that would be a safety major issue. But we're talking small, minor things. And what that required was our statewide group to come together and to look at of course, what is the bill? What does the law allow for? And then also, what are other cities who are enforcing this bill correctly doing, and bringing all that information in a collected effort towards the city of Carefree to just say, hey, you're operating outside of what this bill was intended for. And that resulted in the shift. It resulted in them understanding, no, we can't just deny every permit that comes in arbitrarily. That goes against the laws that are in place. And so we were able to see a win there. And that win was a result of a statewide group hyper focusing on an area that did need attention, and that attention was able to be given with perspective from what other areas amongst the state had been doing in the correct fashion. So yeah, that's an example of what we've seen here in Arizona. We do have a fortunate preemption, but that doesn't mean that there's not those individual situations that need to be continually cared for.
That was a great explanation. That sort of made it much more clear to me what's happening there. Julie, what's been happening in Vermont? You know, what prompted you to really get this association off the ground?
Yeah, well, in Vermont, I mean, the vacation rental industry, we all know, has been around for a long time. Certainly growing and expanding in the past 15, 20 years. But it came to my attention in 2020-ish, where my town started cracking down with regulations, where I was operating, that there wasn't any representation for this community, for this industry in our state. And I discovered that once, hearing that then on top of my town proposing restrictions that would ultimately prevent me from renting short term, the state was also considering a new proposal to essentially ban short-term rentals, vacation rentals statewide. And it just kind of struck a chord with me that that didn't feel right, didn't feel fair. And I was just astounded that nobody was representing this industry in those decisions. We had the hotels represented, the landlords represented, the ski industry, all the everything else, every other part of tourism, and housing and commerce was represented, except vacation rental owners and managers. So I took it upon myself to bring people together and to just echo Dana and Jonathan, the power of having a community behind you, and that unison in your voice and your message is essential, because there is no one right way or one magic solution. It's so dependent on the case and the situation, and you need to be always working at it from multiple angles. So it's our community has we do a lot of work in the state house. We monitor bills and rally our community of folks, talk to their legislators when proposals come up. We've been really successful in not seeing any of those, having any of those bills go anywhere. But we've also found really good success building partnerships with the state agencies, those who are actually charged with enforcing the laws, because we can help them understand the nuances of the industry from a practical standpoint, so that then they can advocate from their perspective for laws that are enforceable too, which is a huge part of the equation.
I'm really interested in how you get an association off the ground. How do you bring people together and tell them that this is worthwhile to get involved? Because we've all been volunteers, and how difficult it is to marshal volunteers and get them to. You might get that initial enthusiasm, but how do you take it to that next level? And we saw this in Vermont, that you just have this great organization. I'll start with you, Julie. How did you pull people together?
I think I credit a lot of it to timing And this just overdue need for connection and community amongst our industry. It didn't exist, and our association formed again off the backs of COVID. I think people were feeling extra isolated and disconnected, and bringing people together, whether it's virtually or in person, for or to rally around something that they all care about, whether it's getting into the nitty gritties of running your business, or it's, being able to come together in opposition to some outrageous proposal. And, then I think there's been a lot of camaraderie and friendships that have formed, business relationships that have come out of this. And I think that's really those connections is what really engages people and helps us grow through just word of mouth.
Yeah, Dana, you this is part of your job, part of your role at Rent Responsibly of pulling all these people together. What sort of objection do you get objections from people, or do you find that people drop out because they lose interest? And so what can organizers or founders do to build up that membership and keep it active?
As I'm hearing this question, I'm just thinking to myself, like, oh, I could talk about this topic for this one question for at least an hour, and probably with all three of you in a lot of detail and exchanging stories, because as a leader, we all want to figure out what motivates, what inspires, what resonates. And we don't want to feel like we're guilting or shaming people into being part of a movement, whether it's in a leadership position and being part of the nucleus that drives the direction and the success of an organization, or as just simply a member that's saying, sure, I believe in what you're doing. I believe in investing in my future. And yes, I'm going to open my pocketbook and I will pay for a membership. But it's all about having that finesse in how you can position what your benefit is, what the value is that resonates with different perspectives. I think one of the phrases that comes to mind is like, the best time to look for a job is when you currently have a job. The best time to start an alliance is when you don't have a regulatory threat, when you're not acting out of desperation. And all too often, and it's to no one's fault, because in reality, if we all had the luxury of endless amounts of time, the things we would be doing would probably look a lot different than, oh crap, this is due in 10 minutes, like time to get it done. So there's nothing like the threat of a regulatory battle or something that might change the way that you operate your business to motivate you. But I just share this to say, it's when you can be proactive, and I'm starting to hear more people reach out to Rent Responsibly. They're like, we've been hearing what everyone's been saying, like, get involved before you need to get involved. Be proactive so you don't become inactive. And it just is music to my ears to see people saying, I want to get ready before I need to be ready. And I think it's a matter of bringing people together, knowing that there's going to be a diversity of perspectives. You want different skill sets coming to your organization. You want people to have maybe not always agreeing on everything, but just the understanding that we are doing this for the greater good of our community. And while X, Y, and Z may end up hurting my business in the short term, it's for the greater good of our community and our neighbors and the longevity and our future regulatory battles that may come up. So I think it's like I said, I could go on and on, but I think it's about finding the right people, not rushing it, and taking your time and just being as transparent as possible. I mean, I think Jonathan is getting ready right now to be part of a movement in Texas. Jonathan, if you mind if I kick it over to you, he's getting ready to do something pretty big. And these are the very thoughts that are going through his head and some of the conversations we're having.
Yeah, you mentioned fragmentation. I think Julie mentioned fragmentation. And, fragmentation is in essence one of the beautiful things about the vacation rental industry. It's that we're all unique, right? All the operators are very unique and they have this personalized approach to it. But at the same time, it's like an Achilles heel for our industry too, because we're not then working in unison oftentimes. And so I think that combination of taking the beauty that is fragmentation, that is individuality within our industry, keeping that as a factor, and bringing in the community along with it is what we're seeing. It's the combination of, I'm not an or guy, I like and so it's that we can keep our individuality and we can be unified towards a larger cause. And you think about a state like Texas, a lot of different types of areas. You've got major metropolitan areas, you've got rural areas, you've got areas that have been vacation rental areas for a long time, and then you've got folks that are areas that are very new and different battles. Where do we find that common ground? It usually can be that zooming out and saying, hey, well, we certainly believe in what our industry has brought, not only for us as the operators, but for the guests. I mean, where would we be without vacation rentals? And so there's a narrative of community that is definitely forming within really what is a fragmented industry. It's a fragmented community, and that I think we retain that fragmentation and we include the community aspect.
Yeah,
I think
go on, Julie.
Just to add on that, what we see too is through associations and through that membership and that true representation of all of those individual circumstances and scenarios and different ways of operating, associations can aggregate that and then actually present it as data, which is really invaluable when you're talking to lawmakers.
Yeah, this is also powerful when you're talking like this and talking about bringing all these people together. It's such it's the power of community is beyond anything that I ever remember when I got into this industry 25 years ago. And it does seem to be moving forward. I just want to go back a bit let's go back to Staywise. New rules drop. Regulations drop all the time. I was talking to Justin Ford recently about the Sevier County in Tennessee and all sorts of regulations dropping there that are really impacting people. So when these things happen, and if a company like Staywise have not kept up to date on what's going on, it can be a real shock to them. So, and it makes this a mad scramble to actually do something, and they don't know where to start and what to do. What's the smartest move that a property manager or an independent owner should make when something like this happens, and how can an association help them? So we're going back down to the individual now. Who wants to kick that one off?
I'm happy to kick off. This is really, aside from representing the industry and advocating for reasonable regulations, keeping operators and members informed of what's going on is job number 2 for associations. So the Staywise needs to reach out to their association to first understand exactly what's changed and what they're responsible to do, what the time frame is. The association should really be providing all of that information, contact details, other resources that any property owner would need to stay compliant. Because again, at the end of the day, the associations, really are the keeper of the industry's reputation locally. And of course, we all want our members and operators to be law abiding. So helping operators comply with laws as they change and understand what those changes are is absolutely imperative, and what an association is there to provide.
And there's often even a forward aspect of, when there are maybe new things that are either being proposed as regulations or even being, enacted. Oftentimes a good association is producing items like webinars and aspects where if you're tuned in as a member and you're paying attention, that information is being brought right to you with the action items right in front of you. And I know that all of our organizations are proactive there, not only in just having maybe a memo that you can read through, but even oftentimes an interactive webinar that you can join into.
Mm-hmm.
And most associations are very good at partnering with many of the larger OTAs and other platforms. So, again, having those resources and staying up to date with all those communications is a really important resource for properties like Staywise. At the very least, should get on all the newsletters and follow all of the socials for their association so they don't miss anything that is coming out.
Something to add real quick to that too is the power of being able to have a forum where you can ask questions. Like I've got my girl group where somebody needs a recommendation on X, Y, or Z. And there's nothing like being able to go to the squad and say, hey, anyone have a favorite provider of X, Y, or Z? And I think when it comes to compliance, it can be overwhelming. And especially for Staywise, if they feel kind of like overwhelmed or like this is too daunting, breaking it down, reading the fine print, understanding the deadlines, understanding the cost of being out of compliance, and then going to the association community and say, hey, we now have to have deck inspections. Does anyone have a deck inspector that they recommend that is reliable and trustworthy? And so being able to rely on the association for the other operators within that community to make recommendations or to help somebody that's not really understanding something, I think is another really powerful element of being part of a group in your community that can support you being in compliance.
Let's talk about community and neighbors, because Dana, I know you've done these good neighbor get-togethers where you bring together not just the short-term rental operators, but people who are not involved with short-term rentals, apart from the fact that they have them around them. I'd love to get the examples from you all of associations bringing hosts and neighbors together instead of driving them apart.
Yeah, I think that the biggest tension between short-term rentals and local communities comes down to a lack of trust and a lack of communication. I think communication could probably be the thread that weaves humanity together, but we'll leave that for a different podcast. But I think that the most obvious thing is when somebody doesn't feel heard, they repeat themselves, and they probably repeat themselves louder and with more energy and more anger, possibly. And then they may try to find new outlets to repeat themselves. So they may end up reaching out to their city council. They may end up reaching out to the media. And that's where we see the squeaky wheel effect. And so in Denver, more specifically, we used to have something. They dismantled it because it had been in existence for 5 years, called the Short-Term Rental Advisory Committee, called STRAC. And it was a group that the city of Denver brought together where there were short-term rental hosts and then non-hosts, neighbors, and then members of city council. And it kind of became this mediation of sorts where people could go express their concerns, express the issues that they had. They had somebody there to listen to them. And then short-term rental hosts could hear what were some of the problems. And we started to see that it was becoming such a contentious environment. I've told this story before, but there were 2 realtors. There were a couple that were accused of not following the regulations. And we were going to see short-term rentals banned in Denver if we didn't get organized. That's when we started the Mile High Hosts. We brought an association together. We created our annual conference called the Good Neighbor Summit. We did listening sessions. We met with our adversaries. I'll never forget when Claire Reswick from Galveston told me, like, let them throw tomatoes at you. They need an outlet. They need to be heard. Let them feel heard so that you can work towards solutions. And it was such a powerful shift for me. I'll never forget eating pastries in the park with this guy who I was terrified of, and how much it made a shift in the dynamic once we could get an outlet to listen. And then we told the upset neighbors that were justifiably upset because they were next to a party house, where do you live? We want to be part of the solution. We want to help you. This isn't right. And so it just shifted the narrative in Denver so much so that we saw discussions around banning STRs, creating a 183-day cap. All of these other things really subside. It wasn't a perfect solution. We still have our own challenges from time to time, but it was such one of those, I'd say, pivotal moments in our story and our journey that made a difference, that has now made it a very much a harmonious, in a lot of ways, community that we live in.
Dana, do you remember the flavor of pastry that was thrown into your face at this meeting?
Fortunately, he didn't throw any pastries. He brought me a pastry. So,
very nice.
Yeah, he was extending an olive branch too. But I was the one that initially was like, hey, sir, let's get together and let's talk about, I want you to feel heard. And that was bringing it full circle back to, it oftentimes comes down to communication and making sure we all feel heard.
Yeah, it's so true. And I'll share an example from Vermont about how neighbors really can be the driving force for or against short-term rental policies, whether it's in a town or the state. In Vermont, we just had a state bill proposed by a legislator I talked to a couple weeks ago who has a short-term rental down the road from him that he just wishes wasn't there, and he wishes it was a family instead. And 2 weeks after our conversation, he introduced a bill against ban rentals. That's a legislator acting as a neighbor and responding to a situation as a neighbor. And to Dana's point, it is all about education and communication and trust, and associations have a responsibility to not just represent the industry, but represent the best of the industry and the type of industry that we want to be. So just as important as knowing who we do represent, it's important to draw those lines as to who we don't represent, because we don't want those party houses. We don't want irresponsible operators out there kind of ruining it for us all and creating those bad neighbor relations and those community tensions that then the rest of us end up suffering from. But just a recent example of how a neighbor, especially a neighbor who has local power, can have their perception can have a really, really big impact on an entire industry.
No doubt. Parlaying off of that too, broadening the base, right? So we have neighbors as a base that is somebody that we should be extending out to, and really there's also other stakeholders within the industry that are a part of the conversation, or should be. So oftentimes it's been hosts and managers that are fighting the battle of advocacy. And my company is a servicing company. We do cleaning and linens and all that for vacation rentals, and having voices that are outside of even the hosts and managers being a part of this. There's a whole ecosystem of designers and realtors and servicers and folks that are benefiting from this industry that should be at the table and should bring their seat and should be a part of this. And so taking that approach to widening the base, where we start to see like there's a lot of people that live in this community that are a part of the vacation rental ecosystem in one way or the other, and whether they are part of the membership, that's work that we need to do as associations and start to reach out to those folks and include them in the conversation. But I think that the broadening of the base is a big part of this, neighbors and other stakeholders.
Yeah, I think just in general, we all need to come out and be seen, and there needs to be more visibility. I mean, we operate an industry that's basically not allowed to have signage, and so we're often invisible, and it's understandable that our neighbors don't understand what's going on or how we're managing and what nuisance mitigation efforts we already have put in place. So I think any opportunity that we can to bring people together, not just within our own circles, but our neighbors, our other community members, our service providers, our elected officials, just to listen and understand each other, really goes a long way in preventing regulation ultimately.
I'll just bring in a story from my time in my property management company, because when we acquired a new owner, we'd go to the house, and that was part of the process. We would talk to the owner, we'd inspect the house, and then we would go and visit. Once they decided to come on board, then we would visit the neighbors on either side, and we would have that discussion with them. And quite often we had to get over the owner saying, "Oh, I don't want my neighbors to know I'm renting." And after you get over they're not going to not know you're renting once, the revolving door thing. But after we started our association, we were able to add into that, to those visits to those neighbors, and say, here's our card as the property management company that is going to be looking after this house. But did you know there's also an association that not only looks after the interests of the owners within our ecosystem, but also ensures that these owners are respecting their neighbors and respecting the community. And that really went a long way. I felt almost a seismic shift when we went to visit a neighbor, to say it wasn't just us as a property management company taking on board, but we have an association that they can talk to, as a neighbor, they can talk to as well. And I don't know how much that worked to alleviate their concerns, but it certainly felt that it was going a long way.
I'm going to validate that, because I say this a lot. I know Dana's heard me say it. Just existing as a resource to the general public and to the media is huge. It's huge for us. We get contacted all the time from the general public wondering what they should do when there is a disruptive property in their community, and we can help them navigate how to respond to that situation as well. So it's such an important resource for the community at large, for an association to exist and include content that addresses their concerns as well.
I just want to add in a question here that just sort of came to mind, because in Ontario, when we started our association of managers, then there began to be lots of pop-up associations in very small communities, and you see them on Facebook. It was a very tiny community that was being hit by regulations in their municipality, and they would come together and create their little microcosmic organization. How can an overriding association connect with these smaller groups and bring them in? Because essentially they feel it's just them, and they don't want to be brought into something that's larger because it might dilute what they're fighting against. Do you have any suggestions on how an association would handle that? And also, to go out to those little communities, and what would you say to them to encourage them to join something larger?
This is a very on the nose question. It's something we're working through at Rent Responsibly, and then I'm working through in my own local backyard. So I serve as president of Denver's group. I serve on our statewide group. So that's your example right there. Like, there's a little group, but then there's also a statewide group. And the reality is there's only so much energy. There's only so many people that are going to raise their hand to join leadership. There's only so much time in the day, and we have to work smarter, not harder. And how can we make a bigger impact with less effort? I think that's like the main goal when we think about volunteering and advocacy and building community. At least that's my mission. And so right now with Mile High Hosts, we're in the midst of talking about rolling Mile High Hosts up into Clara as a local chapter of our statewide association. There's other associations or local chapters or local groups throughout Colorado, but the bandwidth of energy and to be working independently and fragmented, how much more efficient could we be if we were a state organization with local chapters? And so when we have the example of Texas earlier, or we think about California, the idea is we want to have statewide representation. So when statewide legislation comes, we have a unified voice. We already are engaged, and membership dues, which is a key unlock of having a long-term sustainable association, can flow through the top of a state association and then trickle down to where it's needed depending on local regulatory battles. If there is a local battle, it's time to start a local chapter, but be part of a larger network, which would be a statewide association. So that's currently, it depends on how you're starting your group. In Colorado, we started local, and now we're kind of folding up in the works of discussing folding up into a statewide group, where Julie can probably speak more specifically to starting as a statewide group and then having her own framework to address local needs.
Yeah, and it works very similarly in reverse. I mean, we started as a statewide association because we're such a small state, and the numbers to support a coalition wouldn't work at the town level here. But we do have local government that is really the driver of most of the restrictive regulations that we have seen, whether proposed or enacted. So those local coalitions do actually have the biggest impact on the ground. So we do establish what we call community captains within each town. And so these are our members who are volunteering to track public meeting agendas and minutes for short-term rental discussions so that we can then send out larger communication to the entire membership, alert the OTAs, and get the word out in that region to those homeowners to say, hey, you need to start paying attention. They're talking about you. You need to show up to this meeting, and providing the support and training that those volunteers need, because none of us came into this as professional grassroots organizers or, political strategists. So learning from each other and having the state association who's been through it a few times in other situations or is learned from this amazing network of other alliance leaders that we know, we can help prepare our community captains for what they're facing. And I've got a meeting with one of them later this evening because they're organizing and they need help. And we will provide the insight and the data and the resources that they need to the best of our ability. But that connection has to exist. We cannot have one without the other. We can't have one or the other. We have to have both working together.
I like that perspective on state rolling down to the individual chapters and then coming back the other way as well, because it does work in both ways. Julie, you mentioned community captains. Is there a role for, let's say, a community ambassador in property management companies? That somebody, do you advocate for that? That the larger companies could have somebody take on that role of a community ambassador?
Yeah, and generally we see those people who are involved in the industry at that level step into those roles naturally. But I think in general we try to impose on all of our members that you're all an ambassador for our industry, and your rental is an example of what vacation rental tourism looks like. So we really try to instill that across all of our membership. And I guess just another kind of reason for maybe not calling out larger property management companies in particular for us is that we don't have many of them. So our market is very, very boutique and very RBO dominant.
So we're coming up to the last 10 minutes. And I've got a couple more questions I want to get out here. Short-term rental regulations are constantly evolving. We know as Sevier County with some of the severe regulations coming out. It's just something that sort of came a little bit out of field. But Do you know of any trends or shifts that are on the horizon that hosts and managers should be preparing for right now?
I would say, at Rent Responsibly, we've got some tools. We've got a lot of tools, but one of them is legislative tracking. And we were just as a team looking at the data to see the frequency of regulations that are part of city council planning development agendas. And the spike just continues to rise. So we just know that these conversations around regulations, they're not slowing down, but they're evolving. Some of the trends that I've seen in the last year, and I anticipate we're going to continue seeing this year, is towards more strict compliance, but then also enforcement around existing rules and regulations. I think with the huge emergence of tech that we'll see this year, and with AI, I think we're going to see cities taking advantage of automated compliance systems and other third-party monitoring to make sure that groups or hosts are in compliance and not just relying on being able to catch operators that maybe are out of practice. I think heavier fines as well. A big trend in Colorado is a per bedroom fee. We're seeing that when we're effective at not like whacking one whack-a-mole, a new whack-a-mole pops up. And so what we're seeing is these fees, like I think Basalt had a proposed fee of $2,500 per bedroom as a fee. Now, I think that's come down in the last few weeks, but I think it's a maneuver as a way to say, okay, if we can't tax you, we're going to find a way to collect fees. And I think that that's going to drive up costs for property managers. We're also seeing legislation possibly in Colorado this section around lodging excise taxes that allows counties to increase lodging taxes from 2% all the way up to 6%. So that could be a huge spike that would impact finding Colorado affordable or accessible vacation, which has that whole ripple down effect. So I think a lot of the trends we're seeing will be around per bedrooms, fees, earmarking fees for affordable housing, which I think, affordable housing is a huge topic that needs to be addressed. I just get concerned when it is pigeonholed to be the solution of taxing short-term rentals out of viability. I think it's misplaced. But I think that we're going to start to see more and more of those conversations taking place. But that's just a snippet of what I have in mind for 2025 or what I'm seeing.
I loved that you led with, and I totally agree with that. We're going to see enforcement. We're going to see actual enactment of good policies that were created now being able to be enforced. And I think that's a great place for us to be. There's been a lot of good groundwork that's been laid to have processes, and what is the point of stacking on more processes if we haven't already looked and seen the efficacy of those that are in place? And so I think that's a great lead, and I think you're spot on that, which is a good place for us to be then continually at the conversation, making sure, hey, are you enforcing that one that we all work so hard to make sure is in place, and helping that along as the alliances is a good direction for us.
Agreed. We're seeing general more enforcement and additional taxes and fees, I think, is where we continue to see regulation proposals end up. They may start with restrictions, but ultimately they end up with fees that are taxes that may or may not be, cost prohibitive in themselves, but that's where we see municipalities headed. And what I would love to see more of is more of our community stepping into those elected roles and those leadership positions in government, because, the work that we can do to persuade people, to inform them and educate them only can go so far. But we need people who are representing our interests and truly understand this industry to be taking those positions of power.
That comes right back to that quote, Dana. If you get a seat at the table, if you don't have a seat at the table, you're on the menu. And
Exactly.
and I love that. And never forget meeting the.
Oops, you just muted.
Muted.
But I will add that one of Dana's other contributions to those saying is, and if you're not given a seat at the table, then bring your own chair. And that's what we have all had to do over and over again to be advocates, is just show up whether you're invited or not.
Yeah. As we just going into the last 5 minutes, I just want each of you to give a gift to those people who are listening.
Oh, you muted. We want to hear the gift we're giving.
Okay. Yes. We knew things, we knew people, we knew we had resources that could make regulation headaches a little bit easier. You still hearing me?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. It's AI is out there muting my microphone because I'm not doing this. maybe it's Mike. So I want to know each of you to give us one under the radar resource that every host should know about, that perhaps your association members might know about, but not everybody does.
Well,
Oh, yes.
our association has hats and an advocacy playbook, which is a hand-produced 30-page guide to everything you need to know about this industry, about how regulations happen at the local and state level, and all the data and talking points that you need to argue your little heart out to somebody who might be working against you in a productive way, of course. So
I think you should leave that cap on.
Great hat.
Yes.
That was a great hat.
Now available for purchase on the Vistra store.
Excellent. I love both of those. I love the handbook. That's something tangible somebody could get hold of, and just yeah, I love that. Jonathan, what's yours?
Yeah, this is going to be cliche. I don't have cool hats, sorry, but I think we have a powerful resource of storytelling that needs to be unlocked. And you think about the fires in LA. Where would those folks go if it's not for vacation rentals, right? That was a displacement that when we all think about, well, what does it look like for community to band together, for us to open up our doors to our fellow neighbor who's going through a tough time? It looks like the industry that we all work and love. Like, that is the vacation rental industry. And we have got to tell the stories of examples like that, and examples across all different parts of our country, and the folks that get to stay in homes that are welcomed into a community for whatever that reason may be. We have stories to tell, and that is a resource in and of itself. Find your story, find those examples, macro with big picture nationwide, but also within your local communities. That is a resource that I think we must find ways to utilize, is the storytelling of our great industry.
Oh, I love that. Dana, I'm going to pass it over to you for the last word on this.
Okay, so if you were like, if future me could come back and tell now me some like pro tips, this is future you, and I'm telling you to find the time, to carve the time. I could, of course, plug Rent Responsibly. And if you don't know about Rent Responsibly, we make alliance building, community building, advocacy 10 times easier. We have incredible resources, but hopefully you all know about Rent Responsibly by now. If not, that was your plug. But I would just say, create the time now. And if you look at a goal and you think, I can't accomplish that, or that I would never be a good fit for that, or I don't have the time for it, if we break down those goals into baby steps and just start with blocking an hour a month, and just say, I'm going to just start doing research, an hour a month. Maybe that turns into an hour every other week. But just take those baby steps, carve out the time, because future you will thank you if you carve out the time to build community, have a seat at the table, get together with others. And I say this, like, advocacy maybe isn't the sexiest thing out there, but we make sure it's fun. I said I'm here with my industry besties. We really do make sure that community building is about bringing people together, sharing those stories, celebrating humanity, celebrating our industry. And so I'd say just create the time, because time will pass us by.
That was perfect to close this out, Dana. Thank you so much. Just want to thank everybody, Julie, Jonathan, Dana, for spending time with us today, helping Staywise out. I'm sure Staywise is going to head off and join their local association right now. And I hope those of you who are watching this and listening to this, if you are not a member of your association, go join it. If you don't have an association, think about starting it. And everybody, go to Rent Responsibly and check out the resources on that site. And if you're not sure if you have an association, you should be able to find it listed on Rent Responsibly. So just once again, thank you for being here, and I'll hand you back over to Mike.
That was great, everybody. Thank you so much. There was so many amazing little nuggets to take away. Something that Heather and I talked about over the last year or so is we're looking to put together a curriculum for a role within a property management company, which is the community ambassador. And I think that is an individual who just loves to go and be a part of HOA meetings and go and be in the local municipal council meetings and to form those relationships and those connections. And it's that interface between your property management company and the community. So it's a lot of work for an individual operator, but I think any property management company should be having somebody in their organization who is getting out into the community and building those relationships. Because I've always felt those relationships that you build will help you in the long term should regulations and legislation start to come to the forefront, that they know that you're a business that does things right, and you rent responsibly. So there's another plug right there, Dana. So as we wrap up, just thank everybody who's been watching. We've had some good sized audiences on the channels. Not too many questions, but that's absolutely fine. If you have a question after we close this live event, you are more than welcome to leave a question in the comments, and we will get back to you as soon as we can. Just a reminder for anybody who is not yet registered for Stir Crazy Month, you can go to vacationrentalformula.com/SSTIR. This will give you access to deals, promotions, the workbook that goes with the entire Stir Crazy Month program, along with other downloads and resources. And on top of that is a big thank you to Guesty, our platinum sponsor for the whole event. And if you register for Stir Crazy Month, you'll also receive a discount up for 50% off your first month with Guesty. And they are a phenomenal company who can really help you make the switch. If you are looking to do that, and switching your PMS is one of the most challenging things that you can do, but Guesty will walk you through the entire process. So thank you once again. Next week, we're moving into sustainability and how sustainability needs to be part of your portfolio of a business, how you can use it as a marketing tool, and also how it can help build those relationships with your community. Because again, sustainability is one of those things that community-minded folks are always looking at. And it's one of those things that you can really put out there into the public to show that you are contributing to building a better place in your tourist destination. So thanks once again for being with us. I'm going to close out with a little bit of music here, and we will fade off into the background. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.